Sometimes what feels like a closed door or a no from God that feels like it's ruining your life is actually Him saving it. You're listening to the Catholic Woman Podcast. I am your host, Marie Hansen, and I had to start with that takeaway today because I know not everyone listens to the end, and it is so, so important. I just needed to get that out there. So everyone who listens to this episode will hear today's takeaway. So I had to start with that. We're going to talk about this and how it weaves into our lives. I'm going to share a really personal story with you guys that I haven't shared anywhere else before. But before I do, I want to remind you that we are on YouTube. I would so love if you could subscribe to the show on YouTube, help bump us over there, and just reach a whole new audience of people who don't listen to audio podcasts. I would really appreciate that. Also, you guys, I am so excited. We have launched a merch line. It is called Unapologetically Catholic. And this line was really inspired by just the fact that we need to boldly live out our faith in today's culture that is so antithetical to Christianity and Catholicism specifically. And it's gorgeous. You guys, we have crew necks, we have hoodies, there's short sleeve, long sleeve t-shirts, a baseball cap, so cute, and a coffee mug and stickers. So please go check it out. I'll leave the link in the show notes. Unapologetically Catholic. It is our new line, and I am so proud of it. I just feel really proud, and I'm so excited to wear our faith boldly and proudly. Also, the Facebook group. We have a little Facebook group. Go ahead and join that. I'll also leave the link in the show notes for that. But it's a great little private community where we can ask more questions about the faith. And they also already got a sneak peek of the merch line before it had even dropped. So go join the Facebook group and get to have a say in what you hear on the podcast, what you see on YouTube, what we do, all of that. All right, you guys. So today, it's going to be a little bit of a chat. I got my coffee, although I'll probably, not be drinking it because I'll be talking. But I really wanted to make this episode a very story-driven one because I felt the need that it's finally time to share my second birth story. However, there's a huge theme in this one, is that sometimes what feels like a no is really God saving your life. So, to preface, if you haven't listened to our previous episodes, go listen to some of them, specifically episode 18, Healing from Birth Trauma with Bridget Tibaldi. That's a big one where I talk about what happened with my first birth. And all the episodes recorded up until the Charlie Kirk episode, so I think like 4 episodes ago, were before I had my second birth. Now, that my daughter she'll be 16 months old when this comes out on Monday. So she, it's not like it's recent. It's been 16 months since I've given birth, but I haven't talked about it because it is even more traumatic than my first birth, and it affects the future of our family and how many kids we can have and all of that. So I haven't shared this story publicly. My friends and family kind of know, but I haven't shared this publicly, and I'm not sure that I'll ever share it on social media because social media is just so bite-sized, and I feel comfortable sharing it in a podcast format because you guys are listening to the whole story. You're getting a bigger, fuller picture of things. And so that's why I feel better sharing it here. So I'm excited to share this story with you guys, a little nervous, but I really feel it's time to share it and to really bring the message out there that I've learned through this whole thing is that a no is actually sometimes the best thing God can do for you. So to preface, I was due roughly like June 26th, I want to say, and it was a couple days before her due date when I woke up at midnight with contractions. Now, this happened to me with my oldest too. I woke up at midnight with contractions, went to the bathroom, had the bloody show, and she was born 12 hours later. So start to finish, my first birth was 12 hours, which is really, really good. And then same thing started this time. So I woke up at midnight, same time as last time. My contractions were 4 minutes apart. I was having spotting. I was like, great, like this is gonna be it. So I, wait out the contractions until they're getting stronger and more painful. They were like already 4 minutes apart, but they get stronger. I knew it was just the beginning. So finally they were getting pretty strong, pretty painful, where I was making a little bit of noise. So I jump in the shower because they say, test it with a shower and a bath, hot water. If it stops, then it's not real labor. If it continues, it really is. Now, there's some truth to that, some not. But really, do test it with water because that will help kind of calm your muscles down if it's just Braxton Hicks. So I jump in the shower, take, an hour shower. They're not calming down. They're still super strong. So I head back into our room. It's probably 6 or 7 a.m. at this point, and I'm laboring on my like yoga ball thing that I have. And 8 a.m. comes, and they stop. They didn't fully stop. They completely slowed down to like 15 minutes apart. And I was about ready to wake up my husband and be like, it's time to go to the hospital. They slowed down, and I was like, oh my gosh, like, are you kidding me? So I start doing stair walking, I do all these things to kind of keep it moving. And no, they stayed 15 minutes apart. So I was supposed to go get my nails, a pedicure with my sister that day. And I was really uncomfortable, but I was like, okay, it was Saturday. I want to say, yeah, it was Saturday. And I was like, okay, we'll just let's go get them done. So I go with my sister to get a pedicure. And funny story, a pedicure both times has happened less than 24 hours before both the girls have been born. So if you need to go into labor, go get a pedicure. And there is some science behind that with pressure points, stress relief, all that stuff. So I went and got a pedicure with her. And to be honest, I was in a lot of pain during the pedicure. I wasn't having frequent contractions. I think they were, like I said, 12 to 15 minutes apart. But they were painful contractions, and I've been through births, so I remember how painful they get. So they were clearly doing something. After the pedicure, head back to my parents' house. Ian is there with Gianna. They're just playing, and I'm like, I just need to lay down. I'm exhausted. I've been up all night. These contractions hurt. I need to lay down. So I had to lay down, and I try to take a nap, and I fall asleep, and then I get woken up every 15 minutes by a contraction. It's just enough where I doze off and then get woken up with a really painful contraction where I can't fully sleep, and it was just really painful. I'm like, okay, this sucks. So I head back downstairs. I just chill myself out for the rest of the day. They never picked back up beyond 15 minutes. So I went to bed that night. I think I was able to lightly sleep, but again, they were really painful. And right around midnight, boom, I felt a huge click in my pelvis, and I thought the baby shifted into position or something, and it hurt so bad. I actually woke up and yelled, and my husband's like, what? I'm like, I don't know, I just felt a really painful click. I think she shifted into position. So I sat up to go stand up, and my water gushed everywhere. So it was my water breaking. And that's what it felt like both times. It felt like a boom, like a click, and they drop into position. And it's then the contractions get really painful. You think they're painful before. If your water breaks earlier on in your labor, for me, it's always been early active labor, water breaks, then intense active labor. So it broke. I'm like, okay, now it's time to call in grandma and grandpa so we can go to the hospital. So we called them. They come over probably 45 minutes later. At that point, I am actually in a lot of pain, having to make noises and move through my contractions. And we head to the hospital. We get there, checked in, all this stuff, and went through my labor process there. I really wanted to have a natural labor, no medication, no epidural, nothing like that. And I felt better prepared this time because I had been through it, so I knew how painful it was going to be. With the first birth, I did end up getting an epidural at the very end because I just couldn't handle it. To be honest, I couldn't handle the pain. And this time I was like, that is not happening. I'm getting through this. And I did. I'll be honest, I did. I came better prepared. I brought a birth comb. So if you've never used a comb, it's just a comb that you grab and squeeze. And it helped so much. How if you have a mosquito bite, sometimes if you pinch it or stick your nail in it when it's itching, it stops itching. Well, it's not actually that it stops itching. Your brain is just focused on a different sensation. So it really helped to have that birth comb because my brain was it was split focus between the pain of the contractions and the pain of the comb in my hands, gripping it and it digging into my hands. So that really helped me get through a lot of the contractions. Also, Ian did amazing counter pressure this time. He didn't really know how to do that last time, so that really helped. Having my hips squeezed with counter pressure during contractions was huge. And thankfully, they had a hospital room with a tub that they allowed me to get in. So the water actually was super, super helpful too. I didn't want to get out. I was just scared to get out because I knew as soon as I got out, it'd be extremely painful and we'd be at the end, which we were when I eventually got out. So we labor. I think I was at the hospital maybe 5 hours, and then it was transition, and I knew it was transition, and I start, screaming. It hurts a lot. And I scream for an epidural. And I know that I'm literally probably 20 minutes from having this baby. I know that. But I start asking for an epidural. And they're like, you're so close. I'm like, I need an epidural. They're like, okay, fine. They ask Ian, he's like, yeah, that's fine. So they come in, and I am literally sitting there as they're putting the epidural in my back. I am like physically lifting off of the bed because when my body's contracting, the head is literally starting to come out. So like, I'm not even kidding you guys. Like, she was coming out as they're putting this epidural in my head. I have never had a more painful experience than like the fetal ejection reflex sitting while they are putting an epidural in your back. It is horrible. So regardless, they get the epidural in. I immediately move to my hands and knees, and I'm like, nope, she's coming, pushing her out. So I push her out, and she arrives at like 6:23 or something in the morning. So it ended up being a 30-hour labor from the time my contractions started to when she was born. Now, here's where it gets crazy. So I had the epidural placed, had her turn over to my back, I think it was maybe 3 to 5 minutes of pushing and she was out. She was a lot smaller than our oldest by almost 2 pounds, but she was still like a normal size baby. She was almost 8 pounds, but like our oldest was pretty heavy. No, maybe it was a 1 pound difference, but still, considering that it was my second and she was smaller, pushing was so much easier this time. And I just with the first, I remember it was just so much pushing with her. As soon as I felt that ring of fire, I'm like, I am just going for it. And I literally just bared down until she came shooting out. And it worked. It was just fast, done, so much easier. And I was so proud of myself that I did it without medicine. I had the epidural placed, but obviously they didn't have time to turn it on because I was pushing already. And the epidural takes some time for it to affect you anyway. So had her. And now I was in the 3rd stage of labor, which if you're not familiar, that's when you deliver your placenta. Your placenta has to detach and be delivered as well. You don't usually have to push it out, but it does have to be delivered. So this is where I had trouble with my first. It stayed attached and they had to manually remove it. Same thing happens here. It stayed attached and they went in after about an hour because I started hemorrhaging to try to remove it. They spent almost another hour trying to remove it. They brought in multiple doctors. I was literally like a punching bag, and they were jumping on my stomach. And there's a reason I've learned, afterwards why my placentas stay stuck, which I'll get into. But they were trying to manually remove it for an hour. Nothing was working, and it was time to head to the OR. So I had to go get a DNC. And this is why I'm so thankful. I just had that instinct I needed the epidural placed because, like I said, logically, I knew I didn't need an epidural. I was about to give birth. However, if they hadn't given that to me, I would have had to go under general anesthesia. So they were able to turn the epidural on, and I was able to stay awake in the OR, which honestly was so important. I was very out of it. I was in their critical recovery room. Usually they just send people back to the rooms to recover afterwards. But I was in their critical recovery room because my blood pressure was so low. I had lost so much blood. It was not good. And in the OR, I was just shaking so bad. All I could do was pray. There's nothing I could do, at that point. And they attempt to do a DNC. Lots of things happened. They weren't able to get it out. They had talked about doing a hysterectomy because they couldn't get it out. Thankfully, and I'm just praying and praying. They're like, we're going to try for a little bit longer before we have to do that. And thankfully, they were able to eventually get it out with a DNC. And then I went to the OR, or the recovery room, and recovered for a few hours there. And then when my blood pressure was back up enough, I went back to the room. So I hadn't seen our baby for 4 or 5 hours after she was born. She was just with Dad that whole time. And that was really hard. I think the harder thing in hindsight is that I don't know how to say this. We could have prevented that with a scheduled C-section if my doctor had done a little more digging. So what I ended up having was Placenta Accreta, which is where it digs too deeply. It digs past just your uterus and into the muscle. Sometimes it can dig all the way into things like your bladder and stuff like that. Mine wasn't that advanced, but it's what I had with both of the girls. Now, the first time we thought it was just like a fluke. Placentas sometimes get stuck. But with both pregnancies, I have had significant bleeding during the pregnancy. Like, it looks like you're having a miscarriage. I'm having clots. I'm having heavy bleeding. And they always bring me in for an ultrasound, and they're like, there's no hematoma. You're fine. Well, they've never dug into the cause of that bleeding in my pregnancies, which is very significant bleeding. Like I said, if most normal people, it would look like a miscarriage. It's that heavy. There's clots. It's really bad. And now we know, obviously, this is my placenta digging way too deep, digging past my uterus and attaching too deeply. That's what this bleeding is coming from. They never looked into that. They never did like an extra ultrasound of my placenta to see, because a lot of times you can diagnose placenta accreta early if you catch it in an ultrasound. It's not easy to catch. Usually you have to specifically be looking for it in the placenta. It's not the easiest thing to catch, but you can diagnose it early. And when it's diagnosed early, your chances of survival are much better. Undiagnosed, the mortality rate's almost 30% because it can be very, very dangerous. But diagnosed, it goes down a lot. You have an early scheduled cesarean, and usually you're okay. So that makes me really upset that, they didn't dig into that at all. And in hindsight, obviously this all happened for a reason, but it really upsets me. And I've since found a new OB who is experienced in placenta accreta. So I feel better now that I have someone who knows about that, and now that I know what's going to happen. And there's a variety of factors why I have had it twice. Endometriosis, I have a septate uterus, which basically means it's cut in half. There's a septum through the middle of it, and which is also why I think we had 2 early miscarriages, because I think one of the sides is inhospitable to carrying a pregnancy, and the other side, it's so small, which is also why if you see pictures of me when I'm pregnant, I'll have to post them on social media. My belly is so, so tiny, but I have big babies. Like, my first was 9 pounds and she was almost 8 pounds. And it's because it's such a tiny uterus space. It grows back pretty far back into my back and my ribs, which is also why it makes the placenta really hard to come out. So it's just a combination of a million factors that I didn't know I had. Like, there's no way to know this necessarily in advance. Now I know it, which is good. And for the future, that means I will, if we have another kid, I'll need a scheduled cesarean around 34 weeks, which is pretty early. So there'd be probably a short NICU stay there. And there's a good chance that I would lose my uterus. Every time you have placenta accreta, usually most people only have once or twice. And it usually is most common if you have had a C-section and the placenta implants where the C-section scar is. So that's the most common cause for placenta accreta. For me, I haven't had either of those. It's likely the endometriosis and the septate uterus that causes this for me. So to know that now is good. Like, chances of having a better birth are so much better. Now that I know, I'd have a scheduled cesarean, an early one, and that would just be much safer. However, it digs deeper and deeper every time because the scarring is worse each time. So the chances of them not being able to get it out and I would lose my whole uterus go up each time. So the fact that I've had it twice, this would be the 3rd time that I would have it, the chances of losing it obviously go up. So it's a little scary to know that, and it's sad because we've always wanted a big family. And even if I don't, need a hysterectomy next time, the chances of eventually needing one, and now the fact that I will always need a scheduled cesarean, means that we can't have the big family we had always wanted naturally. Now, we've always wanted to adopt too, so maybe this is God's way of having us adopt by forcing us to kind of close off our biological fertility like that. So, there's pros and cons of it, obviously. But that's just kind of like a general overview of what happened. And the reason I really want to drive home the point that sometimes what feels like a closed door is a no that's ruining your life is actually God saving it. If you go listen to episode 18, where I'm talking to Bridget about the birth trauma from my first, I mentioned how I really would have loved to do a home birth or a birth center birth, especially for my second, but we couldn't afford it. And she had said something along the lines of like, well, people who want it enough will find a way to make it happen. And I just disagreed with that. I didn't say so in the episode, but I personally disagree with that because here, at least, the cheapest that I could do a home birth for would be $5,000, and a birth center is about $8,000. We do not have that money, and we don't have extra that we can be saving for that even now. Like, there's no way. It would take us years to save up for that if we really wanted to, and that's just not, it wasn't possible. It would, mean not feeding our family. We're not going to not feed our family so I can have a birth center birth or a home birth. So that just doesn't make sense to me. However, I do now see in hindsight that God closing that door for us financially was the way that He helped save me, because honestly, if I had been in a birth center, they can't do operations in a birth center. I know they can transfer you to a hospital, and they probably would have, but that is just so critical. And by the time they transfer me, knock me out, then, go in to remove it, it's just every minute counts. And if you look up, I would encourage you to look up Placenta Accreta. Look up, it's one of the most severe birth complications there is. And I just have a feeling if I was in a birth center, we would have waited too long, the transfer would have been too hard, and something much worse would have happened. Whether or not I die, I don't know. It could have just been a hysterectomy. But the fact that I was in the hospital already because of financial reasons, that was God's no. That felt like it was ruining my life. That actually ended up saving it. And I have a lot of distrust with the medical system. I really do. I am very much a naturopath. Anywhere I can get, natural remedies, or any way I can go the natural route, I do. I much prefer that. But I also feel like now I have a slight distrust with the naturopathic world, because I feel like they just are like, hospitals are bad. Unless you're high risk, you don't need a hospital. Well, I wasn't high risk. There was nothing that categorized me high risk. And I just imagine how differently it would have been if I wasn't in a hospital. And I just feel like I distrust both. Like, they both hate each other. The hospital world, I feel like, hates the naturopathic world. They feel like it's so dangerous. And same thing, the naturopathic world hates the hospital world, and they feel like it's so dangerous. And I do agree, both are important. Both have their place. I do think a lot of births have unnecessary interventions, a lot of them, when they're in the hospital. But I also think a lot of people who should be in the hospital have home births or birth center births, and then they have trauma and complications that they wouldn't have had they been in the hospital. I don't know. I just feel like neither side is fully telling the truth, and they both are very passionate about their sides, which I understand. But then there's people like me who fall in the middle, and it just feels uncomfortable, because I am so thankful that I was in the hospital for that. But also, I do not like the medical setting for most things. I feel like they over-prescribe, they mask symptoms instead of getting to the root cause. So I just feel like I find myself in the middle, and I don't hear many people talk about that, which is why I don't talk about it on social media, and so I'm talking about it to you in a podcast format, because it feels like I'll get squashed from both sides almost if I talk about it. So anyway, I just wanted to share that with you, because honestly, going through that was very traumatic, and it makes me nervous to think about what that looks, what a future pregnancy is going to look like. But, I'm just so thankful that I learned the lesson. And this isn't the only way I've learned this lesson in life, but this was a huge one. And I had to share it because, sometimes I was so frustrated beforehand that I wasn't going to be able to have a birth center birth. And I thought the only way I'd have the strength to go through a natural birth was if I was at home or in a birth center and didn't have the option for an epidural or pain meds. But that's not true. I did it in the hospital, and the hospital saved my life. So both things can be true at once. And God's not ruining your life with the no. Sometimes He's saving it. Sometimes it's not as dramatic as literally saving your life, but it could be saving your soul. He might be teaching you a lesson that you didn't need to know, pruning your heart, just so many things He can be doing through these no's and closed doors in your life that feel so frustrating, because I feel the frustration, but they're for your good. Now, one other thing I wanted to mention, because I'm sure I'll get questions, is on NFP. And I do have, I'm looking up the episode. We did an episode 20, postpartum NFP with Rachel Person. So if you're interested in learning more about postpartum NFP, go listen to episode 20. We did talk about that. However, I'll just touch on what we're doing because I'm sure people are curious. We are obviously 16 months postpartum. I get my cycle back. I think this time I got it back around 4 months. However, when I'm breastfeeding, it is long. It is 50 to 60 days, which really sucks. What we're using is the Marquette Method. We're doing Marquette, and we're being super strict. I know, bummer you guys, but if you want NFP to work, you do have to be super strict about it. I quite honestly have only ever seen, and this is in Facebook groups with thousands of people, 1 or 2 true method failures. All my friends who have gotten pregnant while using, quote unquote, using NFP have not followed the rules. It's not an actual method failure. It's not an actual surprise pregnancy. If you actually look at the rules of NFP, it might have been unplanned to them, but it's not a surprise. So truly, if you follow the rules, a method failure is very unlikely. But I'll just tell you what we're doing. So we're doing Marquette, and we only use phase 3. If you really want to be strict, you only use phase 3, which is after you've ovulated. And we also confirm ovulation. So we don't just use the Clear Blue monitor. We use that plus the peak, high, low, go count. But we also use Prove PDG strips, which test for progesterone in your urine. And we wait to make sure that is positive because progesterone only rises after you've ovulated. So we can confirm that it wasn't a false peak through those PDG strips, and once we've gotten through the count and have a positive PDG strip, then you're good until your period comes back. So it's very strict if you don't have the willpower for it, which is why I'm going to do a totally different episode on NFP again soon, because I disagree that people can use it selfishly. I think maybe initially people can use it selfishly, but to truly avoid pregnancy for a long period of time requires so much discipline, so much self-sacrifice that I don't think most people would have the willpower to use it that long to avoid pregnancy for a selfish reason. So I will go into that in a later episode, but that is just the basic gist of what we're doing. In case anyone's curious and you find yourself in a postpartum season or needing to avoid for some reason, it's working really well for us, knock on wood, but we're praying every month, obviously discerning, but given what another pregnancy would look like, how that would play out, the involvement that would have, how that would look postpartum, being in the NICU, we just are feeling that we need to wait right now, and that's just what we feel very strongly in our hearts. And obviously, with NFP, the door is always open. So we're leaving it open for God, but we are, on our end, avoiding the days that we know would lead to a pregnancy. So it's working, and I hate saying that because I feel like when people say they're trying to avoid, people are like, well, you're selfish. You shouldn't be doing that. That's just our situation for my medical reasons. I really need to get in with an OB too and talk about all this. So we need to kind of have a better plan for what this would look like for our family, knowing how a future pregnancy might look for us. So that's where we are. Very personal update today. I hope you guys appreciated it if you stayed with me through the end. I am so thankful. But I would love to hear if you guys are someone who has had a child or has gone through something traumatic like this too, tell me. Also, if you have any other stories of how closed doors and no's have turned into blessings in your life, please come share them with me. Share them in my Instagram DMs at the Catholic Woman Podcast or in our Facebook group. I think I'm going to start a thread when this episode drops about that because I'm just very curious. I love hearing people's stories of how God's working in their life, how he is closing doors, but those closed doors are actually blessings in disguise, saying no to things. I'm just very, very curious about how that's happening for you guys. So come tell me your story. Come join our Facebook group. Shop the Unapologetically Catholic merch. Links for all of those will be in the show notes. And I'm so, so thankful you guys are here. Thank you again for being here. I will see you in 2 weeks.